Welcome to our panel, discussion on technology and AI and its integration into social enterprises. I promised I had my speaking notes written much earlier, but just being at Charcha for one day has made me realize that we're all looking at AI in kind of the same way. We're looking for the same things, be it AI in agri, AI in social enterprises, AI in climate resilience. We all really want to know how to embrace AI, right? At what level, for what purpose, when do we do it, how do we fund it, how do we sustain it, and which tools do we choose for the correct problem, right? These are all the questions that actors across the entire social development sector need to answer for themselves. But these sort of forums that really bring together people is meant to bring out the stories for people who have already done this on the ground and really learn from those and not really recreate those mistakes. We need to really learn from our collective. So that's why today on our panel, we'll be delving into the exact same themes from yesterday, but we will be looking at our experiences and stories from the ground from India's growing social enterprise ecosystem. So we have funders, we have enablers, and we have the people who do the work themselves, right, on the ground, the social enterprises. So in this way, as we hear their stories, we want to better understand what our roles will be in order to take the next steps within this ecosystem. This particular topic is especially important as integrating technology and AI into social enterprises is not really a choice, right? It's a given. In 2024 alone, approximately $5 billion in equity funding was invested into 438 social enterprises in India alone. That's a massive opportunity that's waiting for us right there. But the pitfalls are also extremely dire because the consequences of the missteps here are usually faced by marginalized and vulnerable populations. So in our conversation today, we will consider social enterprises as organizations who are both not-for-profit, for-profit, but are deeply committed to social impact. These enterprises tend to integrate AI generally in two different ways. The first one is through integration into their workflow, which is about productivity, efficiency. And although this helps improve services and products, it's not directly impacting the user themselves. The second one is integration into their core services and creating an AI solution end-to-end. And this is what serves the underserved. We'll be seeing an example of that here today with Adalat AI. And we will learn how end-to-end AI can be implemented and see benefits on the ground. So over the next hour, our distinguished panelists will share their expertise and their stories on learnings of how they have defined the purpose of using AI in their particular ecosystem, how they've created new strategies of funding, how they're dealing with the data divide, and how do you really bring in a data dividend instead, right? The digital dividend instead of a digital divide. And we hope to move towards a more concrete call to action and plan as we learn from all of these funders, actors, implementers on the ground, so that we're able to integrate AI in social enterprises in a way that's more purposeful and more effective. So now I'm going to hand it over to the introduction of the panelists. We want to make sure that we see all of our panelists and their roles in the ecosystem as they'll play a crucial role in understanding our discussion today. So I'll hand it over to Utkarsh. He'll give a short presentation on what he's doing on the ground.
Thanks so much, Nilakshi. It's great to be here, especially with three of our partners, NuSocia, Nudge, and Meta on stage. Just a very quick presentation on what we do. But before I start, I want to try taking you back to my very first week in courts in India. I was young and idealistic, and I said cheesy things like, I'm going to fight for justice. And then I got to a courtroom, and I saw this, which is paper everywhere. So much paper, you can actually smell it in the air in courtrooms. And I immediately see heads nodding. That means you've been to a courtroom. And manual and clerical processes at every stage of a case. That's an army of typewriters with actual old school typewriters typing out court documents outside a courtroom in Bihar in the age of AI. And inside the courtroom, more time spent trying to find the right document and calendar the right cases and getting the sentences typed out for a document than actually hearing and deciding judgments. And that's when you realize that you were only told half the picture in law school. Justice is not just a question of law, as you're taught. It's actually also a question of logistics, manual and clerical processes. And you realize that it's because of all these paper-driven, slow manual processes is why we have 50 million cases pending in courts and why it's going to take us 300 years, whatever that number means, to clear this backlog. And for a lot of people outside the legal system, this is a systemic inefficiency administration problem, but it's actually a problem of profound human suffering in many ways. We all are trapped in our litigations, but most importantly, our under trials, who are prisoners waiting for their cases to finish, languish in jails. In fact, India has the world's largest under trial population. Almost 80% of prisoners in India are not convicts serving a sentence. They're waiting for the courts to decide their bails and finish hearing their cases before they can be released. And outside the court, my other clients were slipping into poverty, taking on more debt, pulling their kids out of school, putting them into child labor, just because they couldn't cope with the demands of litigation. And that's why there is this sad saying in the legal system that the process itself has become the punishment. And so that's where Adalat AI is trying to come in. We are a legal tech social venture that's trying to build technology solutions customized for the needs of courtrooms to automate each of these clerical pain points and give back time to the courts and judges to do the stuff that actually matters. We think that if you want justice to flow faster from the taps of the court system, someone needs to unclog the pipes. And so we are the proud plumbers of the court system of India. And the way we approach our work is we identify all the clerical pain points in the life cycle of a case and automate them with technology. So for example, there is a huge shortage of stenographers in courts in India, where every word has to be written down. The oral arguments, the cross-examinations, the final orders and judgments for which we're all standing all day in court, either having a judge write them by hand because there's no steno, and they're basically scribes, or a steno typing very slowly. And so Adalat AI built AI-powered legal transcription tools in multiple Indian languages that understand our jargon, our dialects, our accents, to ensure that nothing gets lost in transcription. The second big pain point is that judges don't have workflows, don't have teams supporting them, that on their own working on uncoordinated and ad hoc processes. For example, calendaring happens in these kinds of registers and diaries where they manually calendar cases, whereas Nudge and NuSocia must have used the cutting-edge tools that are available today to organize this entire conference. And this diary doesn't even have a calendar. That's the irony here. And so Adalat AI built AI-powered case flow management systems and paperless court systems that help them do scheduling, stakeholder tracking, all their work on a single platform so that nothing gets lost in coordination. The other big problem is all that paperwork that I showed you right at the beginning. And to digitize that, we're building LM-powered scanning and digital tools that are also coming in with summarization, intelligent search tools that make document navigation easier and save time. And last, for the citizens of the system who are trapped in the system, don't know what's going on because the system is so inaccessible and so obscure, we are launching WhatsApp-based services where anyone in the country can check the status of their case, get the last order, get an update on what's going on, get it summarized and translated using AI so that everyone is up to date with the latest developments. And fortunately, we've received good traction from the system. We are now running in 9 states in the country, covering about 4,000 courts. That's about 20% of India's court system. And our internal studies show that we're cutting down case resolution times by almost 30 to 50% by doubling and tripling judicial output, by giving the judges back time and not wasting it on administrative tasks. And we're doing this not as an outsider. This is what we learned from Nudge, but by being an insider, by being a part of the system. So we're directly integrated inside the court systems. If you go to one of our state partners, you will see Adalat AI running on the court computers. We are taught as a part of the curriculum in Judicial Academy so that we also do workshops and training programs. Some states have come forward to try supporting us with funding. And most excitingly, some states have started mandating the solution. So as of November 1st, Kerala passed a mandate that every court in Kerala, that's about 800 courtrooms, have to do their work on Adalat AI. They can no longer work with paper-based methods anymore. And so the big idea is that can we build technology and AI solutions in a responsible and ethical way? We'll talk about this because this is an extremely sensitive and confidential setting. to go from paper to platforms, from manual to machines, and most importantly, from delays to dignity, so that nothing gets lost, especially timely justice in the system. And we're very grateful for Nudge and NuSocia and Meta for their support on this journey. Thank you so much.
Tanvi, would you like to go next?
Hi, everyone. So I am representing People Plus AI. This is an initiative of the XTEP Foundation, which is Nandan and Rohini Nilakni's philanthropy. We're based out of Bangalore. We focus on AI for good, AI that measurably improves people's lives. But the way we do it is we're an ecosystem enabler. So we don't design, build, sell any of the tech ourselves. But we work very closely with large-scale adopters. It could be governments, it could be social enterprises, not-for-profits, typically people who have a great rapport connection with underserved populations of India. And we try to understand what kind of transformations they are looking for. How can we enable their adoption journey? So the majority of our work is actually focused on understanding what are the friction points between supply and demand and easing some of those friction points.
Hi, I'm Subhashree. I head the ecosystem programs at the Nudge Institute. As part of this, we have an incubator and an accelerator for early stage nonprofits up to 6 years old. And we also have this program called Pragati AI for Impact, where we are funding AI use cases with an inaugural cohort of 9 organizations, including Adalat AI. As part of that cohort, we are going to be announcing the outreach for our next cohort in the next 10 days.
Thank you for having me here. My name is Ojasvi, go by the name OJ. I lead AI partnerships for Meta in India. What it means is working on the next set of models that we launch so that it is beneficial to the ecosystem. And when I say ecosystem, it encompasses everyone who could be a beneficiary of the model, ranging from a social enterprise to a developer to a large enterprise to even the government. So that is what we do, and then we also look at what are the different ways in which we can bring more technology which are part of the AI stack, which is like PyTorch and everything to the ecosystem, build more feature sets on top of it, and then partner with organizations like the Nudge and NuSocia to bring those technology in the hands of the people who could actually be impacted by that.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm Anaita. I'm a part of the Gates Foundation's Digital Health Innovation and AI team. As Gates Foundation, we work very closely with the Indian government and respective state governments across, as you had mentioned, health, agriculture, education, women economic empowerment, financial inclusion. And I think our focus is primarily on 3 goals: improving maternal child health outcomes, reduction in infectious diseases, as well as getting more and more populations out of poverty by looking at livelihood creation, agriculture advisory, social tools, AI social tools that we've been talking about, I think, through different conversations at Nudge. The focus for us is threefold when it comes to looking at AI and how it can be thoughtfully used rather than being used everywhere for every problem statement at hand. Number one, working with the government and different partners in the ecosystem on how we can enable the ecosystem to adapt to where AI could be useful. So a much more ecosystem approach, working with the India AI Mission, ANRF, with METI, with MOHFW, with ICMR, depending on the sector we work in. Number two is more foundational, so the cross-application around it and how we can strengthen, whether it's Bhashani, the government is leading, language models, how we can truly think about making the technology a lot more inclusive and accessible. And three would be more either upstream, things like AI for social, drug discovery or faster vaccine manufacturing, or downstream when it comes to actual use cases like that were mentioned from a productivity gain perspective, quality improvement perspective, or even driving better database decision making at the last mile. That's what we cover, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Anaita. So I actually wanted to start off by exploring purpose-driven AI, right? You mentioned everyone's trying to use AI and tech and everything. That's really the hype at this moment. But how do we make sure that we're being mindful of it? So I want to start off with Subhashree, just kind of open the conversation, because Nudge has been involved with so many different social enterprises. What sort of patterns have you seen emerging that we should pay attention to?
Thank you. So First is we see a lot of diversity in tech maturity and adoption. So at the one end, we've supported an organization called Tech for Good Community, which is working with 1,500 grassroots nonprofits and strengthening their tech capabilities. At the other end, we have organizations like Adalat AI or iSTEM, where AI is at the core of what they do. So AI, iSTEM, you heard about Adalat AI. iSTEM is working with persons with disabilities and giving them career discovery and knowledge through an online, AI-driven platform. So there is a breadth of tech maturity. The second is that people are also overlaying tech solutions to existing impact that they are creating. And then AI, by and large, is an enabler in these solutions and not replacing jobs or, so it is creating impact, but it is a nascent field. So, we are still figuring out which solutions work. We are still in the pilot stage. Second is that open source is the way to go. We think that government adoption is possible only when there's a preference for open source solutions there. So if we see Llama or DeepSeek or Whisper or Bhashini in the language part of it or AI for Bharat, these are kind of the rails on which the DPG is being built. The third is, government is beginning to adopt solutions that these nonprofits are creating, and that's really the impact at scale will be delivered through the government. So we see that in telehealth's functionality in telemedicine has been adopted as part of the eSanjeevani app, or iSTEM's functionalities have been adapted into the Sugamya Bharat app of the government. So as we, just stepping back a little bit, these solutions are really reaching the bottom 30% of India, and we do need capital risk capital that takes these solutions. So the other point I would make is that we need to invest in the best and brightest and then have a trickle-down effect that other nonprofits or ecosystem can adopt when people who have the tech maturity can actually enable the solutions in a very fast emerging environment in the tech and AI space. And the last point is that this needs to work in low resource environments, and we are seeing how our pilots are managing that.
Thank you. Just quickly for the audience, there will be a QR code that appears on the screen. You can scan it in order to ask questions. So any question that you have as you hear your panelists speak, please just enter it into there. Thank you so much, Subhashree. So I wanted to move into understanding how do you really get into delineating where to use AI, right? So I wanted to move to Utkarsh because it is quite mature, right? Adalat AI has been integrated with the government, it's become quite mature. But where does this intersection come from, right? How did you know that, oh, we don't want to use just a tech solution, but we want to go to AI?
Yeah, that's an important question because when we started, a lot of people pushed us into automating decision making.
Right.
So you go to the very downstream of the work and then take the technology there and automate everything there. But of course, the risks there are incredibly high, especially in our setting, hallucinations, biases, ChatGPT will confidently say, Nilakshi versus Utkarsh, the Supreme Court said so, and of course the case doesn't exist. And so I think our call was that the challenge in a lot of our public systems is that the public official to population ratio is extremely low, right? The number of judges per million people, number of Anganwadi workers or police officials per million people. How do we let them do the work that they're supposed to do, but create tools that add to their productivity? I think that's the central ethos of our organization. So giving them back time is what we try to do, and therefore use AI tools to automate administrative pain points, clerical pain points as I showed in the presentation, and let the decision-making stay with the courts and the judges, at least in this state and paradigm of technology, because the risks are way too high. And I think there is a scope for that in many other settings, because once the speech-to-text tool went out, many other organizations reached out to us and said, actually, we need this for the Anganwadi workers who are making notes on the front lines. We need this in the tax department, or the police officer who's writing the FIR. And so I think there is a lot of scope for tools that remove these frictions in the system that excite us the most, and that's our focus, while preserving the human component of the work, which I think in the current state of tech should remain with the humans in the system.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much. So keeping people at the center, right? Human-centeredness. So I want to move to people plus AI. And just quickly touch on the idea of what does being inclusive and people first really mean, right? That's the ethos of people plus AI. So could you just explain how you work with that principle and how it shows up in your work every day?
Yeah, so we've actually named it for a purpose, because we said that, there's a lot of tech. Tech is evolving very fast, faster than most of us can keep up with it. And usually people who are either living in the fear or the hype of it look at very siloed solutions and think it will transform their environment, their life, but it doesn't. So the pattern that we have seen is that supply, which is the startups, the researchers who are thinking about use cases, are being very people first. They're spending a lot of time in the environments doing user research. I think you also have to understand in the social enterprise world, it's a split value chain. So usually the payer is not the user, is not the end beneficiary. So a lot of the startups and researchers are spending time in the environments to truly understand, who has what incentive and what will they derive from it. On the other hand, what we're noticing on the adopters end is that sometimes it's about the hype or the fear, and sometimes it's purely at the leadership level. So what we're noticing is, and what we at least tell adopters is, don't think about AI, but think about the larger transformation that you want to invoke, right? The second thing is, don't just think, like leadership, civil servants should not think just within them. They should involve their teams, because really those are the people whose lives will be transformed. So that's how we try to really, because we do a lot of workshops and sessions with a lot of government delegates who are trying to understand the world of AI. And we say, firstly, don't come alone. Come with your team, because we actually want to talk to them. And then the second thing we have tried to understand with some of the startups is, the 0 to 1, getting to a POC, a working prototype, I would say is relatively easy. What people miss is that the use case is not about a POC. It's about achieving scale and sustainability. And that's where the demands and the asks start coming up. So I'll give you an example. In line with the AI Impact Summit, we've been talking to a lot of people who are working in Global South and developing their respective use cases. And a common question we ask them is, what's stopping you from getting to the next stage of transformation, production, adoption, right? And a common answer we get is that the results that AI produces is so stochastic, explainability, right? And the adopter understanding how that AI output is getting generated is a miss. So one of the enablers that we want to imagine is benchmarks and standards, and how do people evaluate AI. So it's really keeping people and their trust networks and their environments in mind, but then you have to think beyond a working prototype. You really have to go to the next mile and say, what will take you to that scale and sustainability?
I really do like the idea of, doing that user research. I feel like a lot of people end up skipping that step just to make sure that it's out there and ready to go, right? So really bringing the voices in from the ground at that point. So expanding a little bit on that, I want to go to OJ. We know, as Tanvi mentioned, it's moving really fast. Sometimes we don't even know what this version is doing before we get to the next, right, as he said. So how do we make sure that we bring in social enterprises into the conversation as we're trying to evolve at such a rapid speed?
Sure. Let me take a step back. And I've been working with a bunch of social enterprises throughout my career. And very recently, when we were selecting the cohort for the Pragati program, we interviewed a bunch of them. One thing which differentiates any social enterprise as compared to the businesses that I work with or big techs is the mission that they follow, right? And They are very, very mission driven. They care for a cause and then they want to go deeper into it. And what happens in that thing is that they miss out, or it is very difficult to cope up with the technology shift that is happening. And I think this is the first time that everyone is seeing that the technology is moving at a much, much faster pace. In that thing, what happens is, but what they understand really, really well is the communities. You all heard Utkarsh talk about the legal tech space. There will be so many people, businesses, for-profit building, but I think the way how he is passionate, he understands end-to-end of a courtroom. I don't think so tech companies understand that. We would understand what would be there on the internet. We would understand a bunch of other things that would be as part of the research, but social enterprises understand that very, very well, and then they should partner with organizations and then come up with the understanding that they have, which is at the grassroots level, and they know the needs and the risk and the ethics that should be put when someone is building a AI solution or even a model, which would be the back end of the things. Because you know so much about your particular space, be it in agri or whatever space you're working on, you also have this unique capability where you can go ahead and bring in thought leadership on the table. And when you partner with, say, the government, the policymakers, academia, or even big tech companies like ours, you bring in a unique flavor to the entire mix and you say, hey, if you are trying to build something for this, say, for example, Indic languages or a particular vertical, and when you are building the technology, maybe these are some things that you should consider, then is when your thing will be more adaptable to the large user base, and that really helps. And that is where you play a very, very critical role, or you can play a very, very critical role. The other thing, we often see, because every social enterprise has limited funds, they have limited teams, and everyone is so mission driven, that they don't, critique the technology, or they don't participate in a lot of things that are happening out in the ecosystem. So like I would urge people out there that if there is something happening, you should definitely participate and contribute towards the development. In fact, and the last I would say is look out for similar complementary skills, organizations, and then how do you bring together. So for example, I'm working with a agri, social enterprise who understands the nuances of farmers so well that I've not seen any of the agri companies, the bunch of agri companies that I'm working with. And then they realize that there are certain aspects of technology that they lack in. So instead of building all those things by themselves, they have partnered with a similar social enterprise that understands the other side of the stuff fairly well, and then they partnered and they are doing that. So from that perspective, I think they will be at the forerunner and be not just a trailblazer of the technology, but you'll be a co-contributor or probably a co-creator of the next set of technologies that come out in the future.
I think that's actually a really good point to highlight, because knowing what you need on the ground is something that social enterprises excel at. But choosing what you need to use in technology and then bring that to the ground, I think that's where the struggle is. And I also feel that a lot of frameworks are not quite in place to know what is step one, step two. So I'll just bring it to Anaita to kind of discuss as a funder, right? What are some of those non-negotiables that social enterprises should know about, that they need to have, even on just the tech side, right? So that they can move forward and secure funding in a way that's sustainable for them.
Sure. I think before getting into what they should know, I think as a funder, there's also a responsibility to play. So I think what everybody on the panel already has said, there is a lot of information asymmetry of what's available, what you can leverage in the ecosystem that's always not known. So an India mission offering subsidized compute, not necessarily known to on. Where can you tap into resources or talent to be able to do this in an advisory support, what models you should look at. So I think playing that bridge there, in addition to playing that facilitator role that OJ mentioned around, between a tech and a mission or an idea, or the expertise somebody has, I think firstly that's our responsibility, because I think when we go into rooms and we'll be like, look at ethics, look at governance, look at this act, look at that act, it doesn't really create a partnership which will translate into anything meaningful beyond the funding that you provide to them, because you were doing that governance model. So I think that's step one to my mind. And having worked on the other side, having implemented projects, I feel when a funder plays that facilitatory role, especially because you have this privileged position where you're in the rooms where you know what's happening in the ecosystem. So I think a funder's role should be facilitatory as well as funding. So that would be probably step one before I get into non-negotiables. I think number one on non-negotiables is just critique, and we do this a lot internally, on what is it that you're really solving. Does this require AI? We've talked about the digital divide, 37% digital literacy gaps. I mean, that's where we are at in terms of digital literacy, then cut to rural, urban, then cut to gender, right? Then cut to shared phones or, phone ownership when they have access, when they don't, controls because of gender norms. There is a lot happening in there. So just when we at least think about, given the populations we care about across the sectors that we work in, very critically understanding what's in it that can actually solve to what extent. And is AI the answer? And not using it blanketly. What can we do which can actually be sustainable as a technology itself, especially because we work a lot with the government. So I think that's step one. There was conversation earlier around the data entry problem, right? In health, 50% to 60% of a health worker's time is spent just entering registers, just entering application data. Then there is report out, then somebody will come for an audit. When you're giving her yet another app, and when you're giving her a Gen AI assistant tool, we are working on some of these things, does it really help? And when you're thinking of the use cases of that information that you provide to her in their AI assistant tool, what is it that you will actually solve for? Ultimately, she wants to get her salary on time to be able to take care of her family, and she wants to be motivated at her job. How are you taking care of those incentives for her becomes crucial. And I feel applying that in different forums, whether it's teachers, whether it's ag advisory, I think that just becomes very critical when we are deciding, and we nudge social enterprises to think through the problem statement so that they can sustain in the long run. So that's one. I think two, some of the things around procurement. When public systems need to procure these solutions, we know how our procurement process works. There is L1 that is going to happen. You need 3 options on the table. There's not going to be a single nomination. How do you build your business model or build partnerships in the ecosystem so that you can even apply for those RFPs, right? How do you actually scale? I think in India, when we talk about scale, I think it just gets very confusing, and that's like probably the third point, because what we will scale in a district is good enough in other settings, and that's where AI also has to be really contextualized. So the procurement and the scale problem also interlinks, because we have work happening on, say, non-invasive hemoglobin. We're partnering with Google and this organization called Seva Rural in Gujarat. Now, they've developed this technology. Now, every time that they'll go to a state, even if, they get their approvals at the national level, the state will be like, can you contextualize this to the data in our state? Can you contextualize even a local language that you've created for an AI-enabled chatbot to ensure colloquialization? So I think just understanding what and setting your goal for what you are thinking about when it comes to scale and your business model is probably the third thing. And I think fourth, it was touched upon as well, but capacity. Not just capacity training in-house to retain talent, to have the right talent and the right network, but also capacity when you are going to be selling this product. We talk about knowledge transfers and, in the public sector, training of trainers and master trainers all the time. Is that really going to be sustainable for a technology that's advancing at this pace? Becomes a challenge and a question that we're continuing to ask. So when we think about enabling at least the frontline functionaries, it's always about leveraging the existing digital layer, which they are a little more comfortable with now. And there, how can we complementary reduce the workload or provide efficiency gains for, say, a high-risk case for a certain thing in the health sector or in agriculture or in education. So I think some of those things I can go on, but I just feel like we say we should have the human in the loop when we think about these things. We say that our role is to actually bridge that gap, but can we be more intentional about it? Because you will need budgets over time to bridge some of this. And I'm not talking about climate right now yet. So, yeah.
So you've heard it here first. If you need a step-by-step way, you should talk to Anaita after the panel. But capacity building, I think, is a really interesting thing, because in private settings, you have customer support success. You have, all of these training efficiently to one, build in-house, but also the people who are using the tool itself, right? So I want to talk to you, Utkarsh, because you've done this on the ground and you've worked with capacity building. So what are some of the key capacity building challenges and opportunities that you've seen, and how has it supported the adoption of your tool on the ground?
Yeah, I think our work is a twin engine venture, right? The first is tech innovation, AI, but the second is programming innovation and capacity innovation. And to tie this to Ojasvi's point, this is also when social enterprises differ, is because if I was a tech vendor, I would sell the solution, be the L1 and get out and leave it to the state. Here we have to work in partnership with the state to build that capacity. And these are not tech-forward settings. Even with like judges in districts where we work, they will tell me, they will pick up the phone and call me sometimes because they're judges. And they will say, I have an error message saying Google Chrome needs to be updated. What am I supposed to do now? And so we often joke internally that we're not teaching them Adalat AI. This is computer class, right? This is very basic stuff. And so I think there's a huge responsibility to help do the skilling part, not just of the judicial officers, but of the entire teams. We used to first train the judicial officers and then learn that the teams were not learning. But if you trained the teams, the judicial officers would end up learning because the teams would then get time and actually make the effort to train the judge versus the other way around. And so there has to be a workforce that meets the stakeholders where they're at, acknowledges the gap in the learning, also acknowledges the fact that they find it intimidating, they find it embarrassing. There's a huge behavioral and psychological component, and I think success for all of us here at the end of the day means behavioral change, and that all, underpins capacity. So I think what we are trying to do, and we are still trying, and we're trying to learn, and I think People Plus AI and others have great frameworks here, is we have state task force, and then we have district level task forces which go and do a series of programs. First is virtual training programs, but Zoom classes will only take you so far. Then in-person training programs where we literally sit in court halls with groups of 5 judges and their stenographers and then train them. Third, we hold office hours. So actually right now there's an office hours going on in lunch break where our teams will just on different stages show up and they will come and ask questions, and questions will be like, how do I update my Google Chrome, right? We have WhatsApp communities where they can in real time ask us questions, and we're trying to build more and more initiatives. How do you incentivize the court staff to actually learn these things? So we're now launching a certification program so that they can get like an AI certification at the end. So there's a lot of innovation required to do that state capacity building work. The last thing that's on my mind, and I think we haven't figured it out, is do we have someone in every district and then take over the responsibility and not have the state kind of grow with us? And so how do you meet them somewhere halfway and then they also make the effort to develop that state capacity project? Because otherwise you become a crutch in the system, which is not also sustainable in the long run. And that's a hard question that we're thinking about. What's that right optimal equilibrium where we provide support to inspire enough confidence that they also expand capacity and join us? And that's a very tricky kind of quest in the field.
I think I'm going to ask Tanvi to see if she has an answer to that. Just a framework, right? What are some of the things you keep in mind to be inclusive and make sure that it's empowering and you're bringing the right people to the table?
See, I think we have to understand the people who are actually enabling or making some of these AI solutions operable and delivering them to citizens are very enthusiastic about AI. So as an ecosystem enabler, as a funder, as a startup, I think we have to go into this thinking that we will have to invest time to just educate. Like, it's not even about educate, we are learning too, but it's also just, they have so many questions about the possibilities of AI. So you have to firstly keep that mindset when you're going into these delegations and you're talking to these people about what could AI do and how it could transform your world. The second thing is, what we've realized is, because again, we are sitting at the center, we are a neutral party, is that a lot of the startups, social enterprises are working in silos. So there's not a lot of cross-learning happening. It happens in like sessions and events like these, but they are all having common challenges. It could be around how do I get my data ready? How much data is enough data? How do I upscale? How do I talk to a government body? How do I talk to a state? Very common challenges. So one concept, so we have worked out this framework, which we call the AI adoption use case framework, where we are seeing that different AI use cases sit within different vertical sectors. Like that's where the real value is derived. But for them to actually have impact, adoption, they need these horizontal enablers. One horizontal enabler is not AI safety, but safe AI. AI safety is not technical, it's social and technical. So now education and awareness for that is needed both in startups and people who are developing solutions to think like that, but also adopters to say that it's not just a benchmark, but you have to think about it more holistically. So it's constant awareness. You also have to go into this thinking that this is going to be a partnership that will take time. Nothing happens overnight. I think people here know that better than me, but it's going to be like it's kind of like a marriage. And it's going to take time, and there's going to be a dating process, you're going to get engaged, and then you're going to have ups and downs, and you have to answer the hard questions and have the hard conversations with both sides.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I want to move into more tangible tools, right? So we've heard the social side of it. And it is extremely important for people to just be aware that, oh, these are some of the things I should be looking at when I'm adopting these tools. But what are some of the tech side of the pieces, right, OJ? Like, what are some of the tools that are being designed in a way to create more inclusiveness, to create more empowerment on the ground?
Sure. Before I answer, like, how many of you here represent any social enterprise? Okay. And quick raise of hand, how many of you have used AI in the system that you're building? Okay. So what you saw here, like bunch of them have already leveraged AI in some form or the other. Some might be building, say, a chatbot. Everyone interacts with a chatbot day in, day out. It could be any one of the chatbots out there to answer our solutions. Or someone might be using, like I think Utkarsh, when he was presenting the stack, he talked about how he uses LLM to power some of the things, and there are a bunch of LLMs out there. Some of them are like the base foundational LLMs, but then there are also LLMs out there that help you with very specific things as well. Like, this model does not support Marathi, but then there is a version that supports Marathi. This version does not support agri or healthcare, but then someone has went out there and trained on their data out there. But what is happening, and especially from a social enterprise lens, is when anyone uses these commercially available AI today, they either get logged in because these are proprietary models and there is data, because as I mentioned in my previous answer as well, you guys are the closest to the real problem and challenges of the communities that you serve, and that is your secret sauce. You might have to pass on that data, or if you have to scale, that scalability becomes unsustainable because there is huge cost which someone has to pay out there. So I think the first thing that big tech companies or tech organization needs to look at is how can they have open weights or open source things and technologies available out for the ecosystem. And it could be a choice in the hands of the people that do they want to use a proprietary model which fits the use case, or is it an open source model which fits their use case. And it could be a model, it could be a technology, for example, or it could be even be a toolkit. So for example, we recently worked and launched something which we call it as a responsible AI toolkit, which helps people understand when they are building solutions, how they can do it. So how can more organizations come out with things which they open source? But then also what we are also constantly seeing out there in the ecosystem is when people build on top of open source, they again open source it for the broader community, because maybe like company A might have the bandwidth and the resources to leverage a model and build something on top of it. Maybe company B doesn't has that resources. So for example, Sarvam, everyone might have heard about Sarvam, and when we launched Llama models, they realized that it doesn't support Indic as well as it should have supported. And then they trained a model which they call it Open Hathi, and they put it on Hugging Face. And anyone who was building on the Indic application, they started using Open Hathi, which was a derivative of the Llama model. So that is one. I think the other thing which every social enterprise should look at. And I love the example that you gave around how a big tech, you and a social enterprise startup is coming together to solve a real problem out there. So I think how someone can build these kind of partnerships in place and build tools and technologies for the real problems out there. So I think those are the two things that they can look at.
Thank you so much. I love the fact we're getting to know so much jargon, open hugging, and now I can understand these things. But just the connecting part that you spoke about, right? That there are so many people working in different aspects that could just build each other up holistically. So I think Subhashree, as an accelerator, right? You can play that role of creating those collaborations and those connections. So what are some of the systems and the support systems, essentially, that you have used that have worked, that have been able to create these success stories, and what haven't worked so well?
Firstly, I think what's worked is we need to back the best and the brightest and the best use cases. So, and these will lead the way for open sourcing and adoption by smaller nonprofits and the larger ecosystem. But you have to bet on the right players to have success. And that means they have to be tech ready, tech first, and have the mindset to adopt tech. The other, you need to sell yourself. So even like in our incubator, we call it the fundraising muscle, that you have to have that to be able to tell your story or why it is what you're doing. Apart from that, we also have been, doing master classes around responsible AI and kind of how to think about monitoring and evaluation, what your impact metrics should be, how do you differentiate your impact from your existing solution and when you layer AI on it. But I think the biggest contribution which we are still working on is how do we enable the outreach to the larger ecosystem? How can we bring people who are at the fore of technology and AI to help our nonprofits navigate the solutions that they are reaching? And there is a siloed approach that is happening. We do get a lot of people who want to devote, in the industry, who want to devote few hours per week, but Utkarsh doesn't want that. He wants someone who is spending time in Adalat AI. So how do we even make it aspirational to work in an Adalat AI? For tech talent is another thing. But we have seen at the nudge the power of ecosystem building and, kind of the runway it can give our solutions. So one of, kind of things that didn't go okay is we started out this thing with a lot of, monitoring and evaluation, what people evaluated, that. And we've had this. And actually, like, at this stage, we are just monitoring, right? Evaluation is going to come later. But then being grounded to your use case and your community is very important, and iterating that. So that's kind of, so I think how do we bring people at the fore of technology to actually co-create with more full-time participation with these social enterprises that are working on solutions, and kind of giving time for errors and back to square one, etc. We have to be risk capital and not forget that magic will not happen in 6 months and 1 year.
So being cognizant of the time, I'm going to leverage this ecosystem to try and connect people, right? Just a last question, Utkarsh. As a young social entrepreneur in the audience, what sort of advice would you give to them? What are the things that they should look out for as they start their journey, and just words of advice that you can provide?
Wow. I would say, I think some of the things have already been said, but one is really spend time with the use case. Even I'm a lawyer, I've practiced law for many years, but even I had some distance between myself and the judges and the court staff and the court clerk and stenographer. And so I think when you start out, you're kind of like an anthropologist who's going and living in that use case and trying to learn as much as possible from from that actual end user, not even the government official you're talking to and having meetings with, but the person behind the government official who has to run the solution, right? So I think that's absolutely important, and now we find ourselves struggling to get past the government official to be like, can we please talk to the actual stenographer in the room and get someone who speaks Tamil or Malayalam or Hindi or in their dialect to communicate with them. I think that's profoundly important and avoids a lot of like product iterations, etc., because you get closer to the source of truth faster. I think the second is leverage incubators like Nudge and these ecosystems, because I think what is Nudge at the end of the day? It's basically wisdom. It's just a lot of learnings in one place. And so we were making mistakes, but then we spoke to Nudge and spoke to organizations in the ecosystem and realized there were ways to leapfrog and not reinvent the wheel and skip those mistakes. So I was thinking of some models and I would speak to a nonprofit and they would say, no, we tried this, please don't do this. This is a bad idea, try this instead in your context. And so I think early stage cheat code is to kind of learn from all the others' mistakes and kind of avoid them and leapfrog, which I think helps a lot as well. And so we're very grateful to organizations like Karya, Rocket Learning, who've been just mentors for us. So I think that's the second thing. And the third I would say is don't forget founder and org well-being, which I think we can all be very guilty of. We're all passionate and enthusiastic. But at the end of the day, the organization has to exist independently of the founders. And so I think what one should constantly think of, which you especially don't early stage, is that you have to build an organization and delegate and find that the right set of people who will do all the day-to-day work. And I definitely made that mistake. I think I was nervous about, who would be put in a courtroom. These are senior justices. You kind of are always anxious about that. And I think we could have saved so much time. I could have slept more and traveled lesser if I just did that. So I think that's the third mistake that early stage entrepreneurs make, that I definitely made that mistake multiple times, where focusing on org development is the best way for getting closer to your mission.
Thank you. So we're out of time, but I will ask one question, and this is for all of you. I find this interesting because we all advocate for integrating AI, using it more, finding the correct solution. But how are you, any of you on the panel, thinking about the climate impacts of AI and actually the downsides of, bringing more and more of this into the ecosystem? I don't think anybody wants to even touch that question.
We actually thought about that a little bit. So at one point of time, we were running this program called Open Cloud Compute. And one of the purposes, it was basically an open network for different compute providers. Some could have GPUs, CPUs, bare metal, whatever they have, to put their capacity, their idle capacity on this network. And a lot of our research actually showed us that there is a very long tail of compute providers in India who could be making their services available to people, let's say, who are sitting in the West, and it's nighttime, your compute is not getting used, but it could. So we feel there are like models like that are coming out, and it's nothing novel, right? There's OCP exists, and many people think about this, but this concept of sharing capacity, I think just needs to become more a part of our daily lives, right? Like we should ideally be sharing and caring for each other.
Thank you so much, all the panelists, for being here today, sharing your wisdom, sharing your time. We've heard a lot about, finding the right tool for the question that you have at hand, making sure that you keep humans at the center, and sharing as a key takeaway. And I hope this particular session has been doing just that in strengthening our ecosystem. And that's all for today. Thank you so much.